John Reed, JDUD.com. Jonathan Becher returns to the set. Hey.
Hi.
So we're talking about really winging it on this one.
Wouldn't be the first time.
And talking about Forbes ad voice and other aspects of SAP's vision around blogging and marketing and media.
Yep.
But we don't know where we're headed here. We're kind of without a net. And we don't want to pick on Forbes ad voice necessarily, but let me just start with this whole notion of there's a big shift in media now where
Absolutely.
There's a lot more brand journalism, and part of that comes with some blurring of the lines around sponsored content, advertised content, and actually, to be fair, that implicates me as well because it's about disclosure and transparency and how much can readers tell, who to trust, who's paying for what. We all want to try to understand that better. And just to kind of wear the critic's hat, I think a lot of people in the community feel like SAP does such a good job communicating and creating content and being transparent and authentic around stuff, and then there's this sponsored content thing that goes on that feels like a whole different vibe. Like, you're familiar with the criticism.
Of course
How do
I
you
am.
feel about it?
So I'd rather not go specific on that one site, although we can come back
Sure.
to that one site and talk about general.
Okay, let's just talk about sponsored content.
Let's start sponsored content and then
Okay.
So first of all, I think everybody's struggling with this because the lines are blurring, if that wasn't even an English word. And the question becomes, what's our message and what's somebody else's message? So let's back up a couple of years. You may remember, because you've been around SAP long enough, that when SAP employees started being more actively blogging on SCN, which was SDN back then, there was some outcry as well. Because people said, nope, this is a community site,
Right.
so this has to be our voice. If you're there, then you're trying to get us to say what you want us to say. And we're like,
Right.
well, aren't we part of the community as well?
Yeah, and I would argue vehemently yes.
You would.
And
Did you argue that a couple of years ago?
I don't believe I got into the fray, to be honest with you, but
Okay.
I do remember saying that I support that.
Okay.
And for example, in the case of Bob Evans, who writes pieces I don't always agree with,
Yep.
I strongly defended and supported his right to post on SCN. In fact, I wanted him to because it creates engagement, and you comment and you interact. And I believe people like Bob belong on SCN. Not everyone in the community may, but I do.
So I think so one of the point is, should we as SAP censor voices, even when clearly some of them are pro SAP? We know that Bob is a pro SAP guy. He's an SAP employee. He's a professional writer by background.
I don't think so. I had issues with his piece. I commented on it.
Great.
And he was, shall we say, man enough. He jumped right in. And
Let's say gracious enough.
Gracious enough, fair enough. Keep gender out of it. He was gracious. He responded, and not only to me, but he responded to a number of people on the thread. I respected that.
So that's what I love about what has happened on SCN, is we've had lots of controversy discussions. Sometimes people get to the same conclusion and agree, but oftentimes they don't, and I think that's good. Right. So that's been phenomenal for us, and it's picked up over the last couple of years, and I think whatever it is, roughly 2 million members of SCN appreciate it. Now the question becomes, and here's the tough question, which is SAP reaching all the audiences we want to reach if we only do that on SCN or if we only do that on SAP.com?
Right.
Or are we reaching what I would call a more traditional SAP audience, one that has maybe a little IT bent, maybe that knows us reasonably well?
Right.
And if we want to get this story out that SAP has products that serve other business people, not just the traditional ERP, CRM, SCM, all those 3-letter acronyms audiences, can we get them to come to our community, or do we have to engage where they are first? That was the first thought as we started doing third-party things like Forbes Ad Voice.
Right.
And I think you'd probably agree, there's probably not that many business people yet on SCN. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
I said yet, by the way.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And I actually don't fully really object to this idea of sponsored content as long as it's clearly labeled and made clear.
So I think,
and
yes.
one of the issues is that I have approached a couple of people at SAP in the last couple of months and said, I don't believe, and a lot of my colleagues don't believe, that it's clear enough. Now I know that certain entities that accept your payments think it's clear enough, but I don't.
Again, I'm going to leave them out of it.
Yeah.
So I think you've hit on probably the most important issue, which is if we go to any third-party site, which has a particular reputation, whether that's Forbes or Business Week or any of the other reputable sites, or frankly another community, and if we are not open that this is an SAP employee expressing our opinion, then we're sort of stealing their brand equity and pretending like it's us.
Right.
And I would agree, that's probably not a smart thing to do.
Right. And so what I emailed the last couple of months to a couple of your internal people was, please, at the beginning of each blog post, just say, this is a sponsored content by an SAP employee.
So let's go to the word sponsored.
Yep.
So
or paid or whatever, like etymology aside, like something that indicates that you paid for the space.
is it important that we paid for it, or is it important that they're an SAP employee?
Both.
So let's play this out.
In my opinion.
This is the beauty of these videos. This is
Right.
for your opinion. So let's play this out a little bit. Let's imagine there was a well-known site, and again, I don't want to pick on anyone, that said, we think of the quality of writers are so good that we're going to give you the space for free, for no charge.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's not sponsored, it's not paid for. Are you okay with that? I'm going to guess you're not, because I'm going to think you're going to say it's still a quote-unquote biased opinion because it comes from an employee.
I'm okay with it if it says it's an employee.
Okay.
In that case, it wouldn't need to say sponsored content because it's not a commercial relationship with that
Correct.
point. So simply saying this was written by an SAP employee, I think that would suffice.
Okay.
I think it would suffice. And I actually think that would be a simple fix that SAP could do that would make a lot of people happier. Now, there is a little bit of a problem, which is that sometimes in the Twitter sphere, for example, these things can get taken out of context and people can start tweeting stuff and lose track. Like I know that, for example, sometimes I'll tweet a piece that appears on one of these sites.
Yes.
And
You yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I like it,
Yeah.
and I'll say sponsored content.
Okay.
And then when someone retweets it, that'll get taken off. And so there is a little bit of potential for ambiguity, but I think if good intentions are made to clear that up, to me, that can work. But then there's another piece of it, which is more of a business argument that I would make to SAP, which is that I think that you're giving away a lot of really good content in some cases to other domains.
Oh, wait, hang on. We'll get there. Let's
Okay.
keep talking about sponsorship.
Okay.
Because part of our strategy is go where the conversations have already happened.
Right.
Seed our, SAP has something interesting to say about that, and then
Right.
bring them back to our properties. But let's
Okay.
delay that for a moment.
Okay.
So I know you're hung up on the word sponsored, so I just want to talk about that for a little bit.
Okay.
Because should I, when I post on SCN, say that it's sponsored content? Because I pay for SCN. It costs me a lot of money to run SCN. Should I?
I don't think so, because I think it's implicitly understood that SAP funds SCN. So I think it's a little bit different.
I don't know. I think some of the community members on SCN might wonder about that.
You could ask them.
Okay.
I think it'd be a valid thing to ask. I don't.
How about my own personal blog? You know that I'm somewhat of, I wouldn't say prolific writer, but I enjoy writing as well.
Yeah.
Do I need to say that that's sponsored content too?
No, I think in that case I would advocate just having a disclosure page that explains who you are and what you do.
Okay.
And that people could refer to that disclosure page. So I kind of look at,
So the part I think we agree with violently, if you can, one that can agree violently, is we as SAP probably need to do a better job that when we're writing and talking in public forums that are not automatically associated with SAP,
Right.
showing our personalities that we're SAP employees.
Yes.
I'm not yet sure personally about the sponsor part about it.
Okay.
Because I think you might be surprised a number of times that we actually don't pay to play, that we're actually asked to do it. And by sponsoring it, we're implying a commercial relationship that may not actually exist,
Okay.
which then detracts from what we've done.
Sure. So I would simply say disclose the sponsorship when you pay, and when
Okay.
you don't pay, don't.
Fair enough.
Fair enough?
Yes.
All right. Well,
buy that.
If those changes happen, I think you'll see a lot of people that will respond enthusiastically.
But I think we could go a step more than that.
Sure.
Because you started to say something about, how about us? What's in it for SAP?
Right.
And I think in the end of the day, we want the community of business people talking on SAP properties, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
We love these third-party properties. They get audiences we don't have. But the whole point is to drive them back and engage with people like you and other community members to look at the, frankly, commercials that are on SAP.com. I'll
Right.
admit there are commercials, but they describe us more than we would want to describe on a third-party site. And so one of the fun things that we're either just launched or launching tomorrow or launched today, depending when you put this video up on your website,
We'll time that.
we'll time that pretty
Yeah,
well, is a business innovation site, is basically a thought leadership site. And I know you're probably going to be skeptical if you're watching this going, if it's on SAP.com, it's bound to be marketing stuff. But check it out. It's going to be on the homepage here. This is less about what SAP is doing in the cloud or what SAP is
Right.
doing in the mobile or that, but rather, what does it mean to become a mobile-enabled company?
Right.
What does it mean to move from on-premise to on-premise? Now, you know what? You looked at the site. Give the people your impressions.
Well, I thought it was still in a beta stage. There's a lot of content to be added, but I have said for a long time that I wanted SAP to develop a site like this, in the sense of SAP should establish thought leadership on its own domains, in my opinion.
Yep.
For a variety of reasons. And part of it is that I feel like we should set the bar high in terms of the caliber of content. And we should
got
say
it.
that we're going to earn the eyeballs the hard way by doing stuff that really engages people. And it seemed to me that you put a stake in the ground with that site to say we're going to try to do that. And the advantage for you, and what I've been trying to argue from a business perspective, is that I think strictly from even like a lead gen perspective, having control of the property and earning those eyeballs, yeah, you won't get as many hits on the first articles as on these bigger sites, but over time, you're going to get a lot of traction for that, and you're going to have more control, shall we say, over what people see on that page. So in my view, there's a real business argument there as well as an editorial argument.
So I completely agree with you 100%. You're probably not surprised. In some sense, we're turning ourselves into a kind of a magazine.
Right.
And we're going to need an editorial calendar. And for those of you watching, we're going to need writers. So we would like you guys to submit content. But here's now it gets a bit tricky.
Right.
Which is we're going to have to decide how much of that content needs to be labeled sponsored content as well.
Right.
Because if you want to get in and you're pushing a particular agenda, we probably don't want you to do that. But who knows? We may be turned into SAP advoice.
Right. Well, I think when we have these kinds of discussions, oh my God, I can't believe you just slipped that through and I didn't even register. Wow. Well, if
don't you want your content on this new business influencer site?
I might.
You might. He hedged his bets there, crowd.
I might. I think it's really more about. There's two things. First of all, it's a legal discussion, right? Like, are we legally compliant? But then there's a lot of gray area around what's appropriate and ethical and what's fair. And there, I think, there are varying standards. And for me, it's the same, because when I blog on sites, I have to look at, did I promote my own clients in these blogs? And to what extent did I disclose that? And, SAP is going to have to think through the same things. And, the advantage of having your own domain, in my opinion, is I think there's an implied level of ownership over that content just because it is on SAP.com. But does it mean you might have to sort through some disclosure issues around that and maybe have a statement, or maybe, yeah, you might.
Probably.
And those are good discussions to have, because what I find is that the more meticulous people are about that in general, the more trust they tend to build with their readers. Which is to say that this notion that there's objectivity anymore, I think, is crap. I mean, we're all getting paid by someone, and that includes myself, right? And so my job, I believe, is not to try to be objective, but to say, here's my agenda, as transparently as I can give it to you. Here's what I know, here's what I care about, and now that you know that, you as a reader can decide whether to trust me or respect me. And I like the fact that with this particular site you're launching, SAP is attempting to go down that same road. So,
with maybe one caveat that maybe the people watching this video wouldn't expect, which is we are probably going to author much less than half the content that's on the site. Okay. My own personal goal would be maybe 25-30% at the most.
Okay.
Because if we're really going to be objective, if we're really going to talk about industry trends and not just SAP, then we need third-party voices there as well. And sometimes we won't agree with what the third-party voices are, but that's okay as well.
So what if someone wants to blog on your site? What do they do?
They come ask us to blog on our site.
Okay. And how will you distinguish it from SCN?
To be announced.
To be announced. Okay, so that's something you're going to sort out.
Yes. I would tell you the general idea is the same way the web works. There's the grand wide web that we don't control at all. There's SCN that we loosely control.
Right.
And there's SAP.com that we more tightly control. So if you want to get on SAP.com, there are going to be more rules, more barriers, more things. You can't say whatever you want. You can't.
Right.
We're probably, you know what? We might even allow one of our arch enemies on there as long as they don't slander us and things like that.
Yeah.
Whereas SCN, you can do almost anything you want with some looser restrictions. And if you run your own website,
Sure.
It's basically concentric rings.
All right. Well, I give you a lot of credit for coming on camera and talking this stuff through, man. We'll see how it goes.
And by the way, the good news is all of us are still figuring this out. The rules are yet to be written. So if you think we're doing things wrong, let us know. And when you like what we're doing, let us know that as well.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Take care.
See you in Orlando.
See you there.